Okay, good evening or potentially night or morning where you are. My name is Dorian Fougere with CEM's Social-Ecological Resilience and Transformation thematic group. Let me actually turn it over to my colleague, Salima Medouar, who is the lead for the CEM Young Professionals Network, to say hello and welcome us and start the webinar.
Great, thank you. Yeah, just to present myself real quick, because I know we have a lot on the agenda and not a whole lot of time to go through everything. And we also would like this session to be a bit more engaging. I'm Salima Medouar. I am the lead of the Young Professional Network in IUCN. I'm also vice chair for the region of North America for the Commission on Ecosystem Management. And just to speak briefly about the Young Professional Network, any member of IUCN below 35 is automatically registered as a young professional. And we are ramping up our engagement with the Young Professional Network, developing a core group, and other initiatives are underway to improve the Young Professional Network representation, improve knowledge sharing, connecting and providing opportunities for the young professionals to connect. So anybody who's interested in joining, I would highly encourage you to do so and to reach out directly to myself if you'd like to have a chat or would like more information. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you, Salima. And I see my colleague Manuela Ruiz Reyes has joined. So let me briefly share the screen and I will briefly walk you through our agenda. Okay, so the goal of today was to give you a basic orientation to resilience and then also to help people think about how resilience might intersect with their ongoing work. For the agenda, we have the welcome from Salima. I'll give you a quick agenda review and guidelines for discussion at this moment. And what we'll do is cover a little bit of a background, just kind of a primer on system science. There's a lot here and it could go very deep, but we'll try and keep it fairly high level and more as, I wouldn't necessarily say a teaser, but certainly a preview of items that could each be longer discussions in themselves. And then my colleague Manuela, who is the co-lead for CERT, will walk us through what the group is doing, how it's structured and what it's doing at this point. And then thank you, Peter Wells and Bent Reck. They are part of CERT and also young professionals, and they'll talk a little bit about their experience being in the two groups. I think Ben is actually new to young professionals, but he will speak from his perspective about some of the work that he's doing. And then we'll just check where we are, see if there are any loose ends, and adjourn. So with that, the only other thing I'll say, just actually I can go just from the slides. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to switch what piece I am presenting. Same thing there, but let me just close it and reorient the slides a bit. Okay, so hopefully those slides are fairly large on your screen. Oops, we just did the agenda review. Very simple guidelines for discussion. If you could be on mute, if you have a vacuum cleaner behind you, please be comfortable, stand, sit, turn off your camera if you like. Honor time. We do have a lot of stuff, but a small group, so help me just stick roughly to timelines. Common conversational courtesy, so not interrupting people. Raise your hand or ask it, put in the queue or put your name in the chat if you want to ask a question. That will be great. Humor is welcome. It just shouldn't be at someone else's expense. All ideas and points of view have value, so you're free to disagree with me, with any of our colleagues. Help us understand what's important to you. It's certainly okay to disagree with each other. We just ask that you avoid editorials, which are statements about what someone else did, whether it was smart or not so smart. Let me see, Mariana, thanks about the full screen. I'm operating from a laptop. Can people see? Is it large enough to see the slides? Okay, I'm going to leave it the way it is simply because I'm doing a little bit of laptop work here, but thank you for the feedback, Mariana. Oh, Manuela. We see your PC screen. Oh, oh, I see what happened. Okay, I didn't share the right thing. Thanks for flagging that, Manuela. Manuela. Got it. I don't know why that exactly happened. Thank you for flagging that. Really appreciate that. Great. Okay, so now it should be the application. All good?
Yes. Now
okay. Thank you, Manuela. Okay, so just moving then on to the part of our presentation here on the systems primer. So I'll say briefly, a system is an interconnected set of elements that's coherently organized in a way that achieves a particular function. System science is a way of understanding and working with complexity in an organized, holistic fashion. It's partly a conceptual terrain, but it's also a series of practical tools and approaches. Many practitioners and scholars argue that working in systems should really be a basic competence if you're working, whether it's business, climate mitigation, sustainability, conservation. Here you can briefly see an example of a system map around Paris transportation system. System mapping, it's a common and powerful tool to understand system dynamics. Generally, we have some experts on this call, so we'll have some good discussion. Generally, you have closed and open systems. The former types of systems are common in scientific experimentation, but typically there's some kind of interaction with the surrounding world. So my general advice is to think about closed and open systems less in absolute terms than in terms of the center of gravity or the emphasis or how you would characterize them primarily rather than in absolutes. And this points to one of the challenges you'll face as if you start working in systems. One of the first steps really is defining a system boundary. You can do this in various ways. You can go from cells to individuals, to institutions, to ecosystems, to societies, to the planet, and beyond. So the microcosm, the macrocosm, and again, system maps here are a helpful tool. A little bit more on system fundamentals. We think typically about a system being composed of stocks and flows and feedbacks, if we're looking simply. Feedback loops are a distinctive emphasis of system science. They really help to generate some of that dynamism that's inherent in complex systems. And a feedback loop itself involves a set of relationships where one variable leads to a change in another variable and eventually leads to a change back in the original variable. So there are two types of feedback loops that we focus on: balancing feedback loops, which help to, let me just allow this person to enter, balancing feedback loops, which help to stabilize a system by keeping it within a given range of behavior, and then reinforcing feedback loops, which help change a system by either increasing or decreasing rates of flow and exchange. And here you have an example of a fishery from Donella Meadows, who many of you may recognize the name, a foundational scholar and practitioner in the field of system science and system thinking. Systems, particularly complex systems, also have a series of characteristics. Another kind of rough division we make is between living and non-living systems. Again, less about absolutes, but more about a center of gravity. Living systems are characterized by non-linear behavior, emergent properties, uncertainty, resilience to disturbance, learning, autonomous organization or self-organization, adaptation to external drivers, adaptation to internal processes. And when there's a disturbance that really exceeds this ability to adapt or exceeds resilience, you can have transformation of the system structure and function. Then one last kind of group of categories, you also have ecosystems and social ecological systems. Again, it's a question of the center of gravity. You do have some ecosystems that have less human disturbance. You have some social systems that are further removed from their basis in the natural world. And in most cases, though, conservation is focused on the interactions between these two. So we're not looking at, for example, just protected areas as a line on the map, but also the indigenous people, for example, that have lived there and continue to steward these places. So we're focused primarily on social ecological systems. And a key argument within SERT and within system science in general is that if you take a reductionist or a mechanistic or a purely engineered or a purely economic approach to trying to understand these complex social ecological systems, it's really difficult to grasp, much less intervene, much less try and steer some of the changes happening in these systems, in these living systems. So it's not very effective, those types of reductionist approaches in conservation. Keywords, don't worry, I'm not going to read the slide here, and we did provide some reference material in advance, but I'm just providing you some of the keywords here that have come up before. I will post these slides and share the link as well, and there's the citations there as well. Two other pieces I will share briefly, key concepts. One is the adaptive cycle, and I'm just doing a little time check. The adaptive cycle, which is a way of thinking about how a system evolves. You begin in the bottom left-hand side with resource exploitation, you get exponential growth. Moving into the upper right, the system develops processes and structures, potentially rules and institutions that conserve material and energy. Eventually, at some point, there's some kind of disturbance that overtakes the system where you have a collapse. There's a rapid release of energy and material. And then the system either goes back into the top left, either renews itself, somehow adapts or modifies itself, or if it's significant and overtakes it, then it transforms to a different system. On the right-hand side, you see panarchy, which is another concept. This focuses particularly on how variables interact across different scales. Again, you have the reinforcing and the balancing feedback loops. And also in certain instances, they can crystallize and promote change. Panarchy in particular emphasizes how innovation typically occurs in small niches and changes can aggregate up through a system. Also, in some cases, you might have structural changes that have some kind of radical rupture and you can get downward movement as well. The one other kind of key concept to put out there you may have seen is this idea of leverage points, which talks about where you intervene in a system will have more or less impact. So for example, some people talk about rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, or you're trying to change and steer the course of the ship itself. You have shallower leverage points, things like parameters. These are things like taxes, subsidies, prices, or you move to deeper levels of intervention where you have really the design of the system, the rules of the system, the values that have gone into the system, and the paradigm of the system itself. So with that, I'll turn briefly to this idea of transformative conservation, which is one of the pieces that was a reference point for the group's work. The group actually has been around, I believe, since 2014. Mike Jones is on the call. He was the original founder of the then resilience thematic group. So this transformative piece is something I worked on with Mike and a couple other colleagues over the past few years, and then we recently published a piece on it. The idea that we're trying to push here around transformative conservation is just to recognize that there's a series of interlinked crises. You have biodiversity, you have climate, you have equity and justice, all kind of pulling together. And in some cases, you have transformation of these systems, whether it's the Pantanal in this picture or the Great Barrier Reef, or you're looking at palm oil in Borneo. So you can take that two ways. If you take it positively, it's an opportunity to rethink and restructure priorities and also society. So how do we practice conservation? What do we want to focus on? What do we want to invest in? How do we want to change our practices? Whether you're looking at water in New Zealand, urban agroecology in Argentina, or rewilding with bison in the Great Plains of the United States. Not going to read the definition in detail, but we are focused on the relationships between people and nature and trying to work across scales like you saw earlier, and also focused on just transitions, looking at net zero economies and the sustainable and regenerative use of natural resources as an outcome. The paper that we put forth originally within IUCN and then as a published piece looks at 6 strategic recommendations. We talked about the first one already, which was taking a systems approach. So I won't repeat that one, just another example of a systems map. The second one was partner with political movements, probably people that are familiar with IUCN, and maybe some people that are not, but know that there's attention paid to youth involvement, to Indigenous people, and also to women and gender and livelihoods. And so fundamentally with this piece, we feel that science and scientists have to get engaged in the political and the normative process of pushing for the types of landscapes and relationships with nature that we want to see, and also have to get involved in the political movements that are also pushing for these pieces. So getting out of that purely objective space, that might be things around Indigenous transitions or environmental justice or Extinction Rebellion is one example of direct action in the streets. So really partnering with the political movements and thinking about power relationships. The third one is to link the societal and the personal. So to recognize that institutions and rules and norms are important, but it's also how we ourselves live and how we think. What are our relationships with nature? What are our behaviors, our ethics, and trying to think about how these two support each other and shade into each other. Here you have examples, whether they're interfaith partnerships, like there's a piece here from IUCN work in Hawaii, or you have novel rituals. You have a series of ways of looking at linking the societal and the personal as we go forward in transformation. The fourth recommendation is to update how we plan. It's trying to cope with some of these characteristics I mentioned earlier, the nonlinear behavior, the uncertainty, the emergence, and really trying to plan in a way that more accommodates experimentation, disturbances, mistakes, and learning, gives more attention to inertia in a system, to power relations, to feedback loops, to agency in multiple places. And you have some good tools like scenario planning, and you also have some other pieces that are pushing out, for example, assumption-based planning, which is focused a little bit more on contingency and vision versus a linear endpoint. The fifth one, is to shift from diagnosis and planning to action. So we recognize assessments, policy plans, funding, those are all fundamental prerequisites. but they should not be a replacement for really then implementing and institutionalizing the types of changes we want to see. Some examples, I have the slides in backwards order, but one is transformation labs, which create a space for people to actually work on these processes together and to learn and to share experiences. And then going back one slide, some of this work around science for climate action, really solutions-oriented science that's putting scientists in dialogue with practitioners on a regular basis and focused on tangible outcomes. The last recommendation, almost done with my presentation here, which I know is just about at time, probably over by a minute or two, is improving our ability to adjust to transformation as it occurs. Part of this happens if you read the news, you'll see, well, gosh, the real changes in the field have outpaced the modeled projections again, whether it's storms or polar ice melting or whatever it might be. So we're trying to think about how do we introduce flexibility and nimbleness to respond and change our approaches as they go forward. Part of this is monitoring, part of this is adaptive management, which are very well-established fields. And it's also partly adaptive governance as we're thinking about how do we have some of this flexibility, this nimbleness in our laws and our regulatory requirements. So with that, I think what I'll do is still suggest maybe we do just 2 or 3 breakout groups. I will share and cut and paste these. It's one question basically for probably 5-6 minutes of discussion. We'll ask you to make sure everyone in the group speaks at least once. It's just one question, which is which one of these recommendations seems the most useful to you and why? And so just to share that. And again, I'll put that in the chat recording. Okay, so we've just come back from the breakout groups with a little bit of entertainment on the side. And I think what we can do is take a moment or two, a few minutes, and actually see just if people wanted to share any highlights from the discussion, which was around if any of those recommendations around transformative conservation seem useful to you and why. So if anyone wants to start or share anything from their breakout, please go ahead.
And Thomas, or should I mention what we talked about?
You can, Manuela, it's okay.
So actually we drifted into our main questions around the concept. So I think there's a lot of, there's questions on how do you pass the theory to practice? And then there's how to embrace complexity, for instance, for decision makers or in governments, like how do you actually do that when things work and have worked in such different ways for decades or centuries, or how do you change mindsets, the other mindsets that you have to work with? And questions around how does this change depending on where you are located, how the ecosystems where you're at or the societies where you're at kind of already give you a sense of complexity and resilience because of the ways of how these systems have worked or work in, you know, in terms of climate, in terms of seasons, in terms of things like that. So yeah, we talked about, I guess, those 3 main topics.
May I ask anyone want to thread or augment? Please go ahead. I know Mike actually had a comment that might fit on this. Mike, if you wanted to share the piece that you thought was most important, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Just to say that other group, they're really good questions, and I hope we can discuss them a little bit more. But for me, going to that transformative conservation paper, step 1, fundamental to all of it, is to become familiar with systems and systems thinking, because if you don't have that, none of the rest of it makes a lot of sense. And just in relation to that, there is a really good text that was written by members of the Resilience Alliance, which takes the social-ecological systems concepts and puts them into an ecosystem context with lots of different chapters regarding different ecosystems to give you a really strong sense of how they work. Unfortunately, this isn't something we can share freely, but I can provide the title and whatever for the book. Then the other thing that's I think particularly useful, that's published recently and it is free, is the WWF publication on system principles or principles of systems thinking. I think it was Dorian who, no, it was somebody else within the group shared it. There were two books, and it was the principles one. I think they call it the art of systems thinking. really, really useful, and that's free. Thank you.
We will probably update the reference list and add that one. Thank you, Mike. And let me ask, anyone else want to thread on any of this or any other highlights? Salima, you're nodding your head, so I might kindly pick on you if you're willing. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. I just thought it was interesting because I was with Peter Wells and we had this similar conversation that you did, Manuela, where we were talking a lot about governance, and we did find it really useful. I think it was number 2, the one mentioning political movements to achieve equitable and just transformation. We were sharing our experiences in practice, how this works in practice, and the importance of having local communities involved in those solutions, and the difficulty of getting governments on. I feel like there is some a consensus for when it comes to conservation or even climate change mitigation to get on board on things, but we were discussing the way how to do that is the more nebulous and not well agreed upon concept, I guess. So we're just, I think it was interesting to see like government and how government structures and moves on these things is something that was really interesting to both of us.
Thank you, Salima.
And
Peter, do you want to thread? Go ahead.
yeah, maybe to jump right onto that, Salima, I think that's a really good way to describe it, is the nebulousness of trying to solve the challenges or find solutions at large scale. And that's again what the importance of the local in this, in that we can have a very high level target, but having an applicable solution that's tailored to a locality is very important for not just for its long-term health, but for the ownership and how it sinks into the culture of the place.
Thank you, Peter. Bent or Tomas, before we go, you want to weigh in? Go ahead, Bent. No, Tomas, anything before we go to the next part of our agenda? Go ahead.
No, I'm just very happy to hear what, for example, what Salima just said, that there are discussions about this even in outside of IUCN, and like that people are actually trying to get deeper into it, into the practical field, and because that's the start. That's the start, and if we continue like this, hopefully in several decades we can actually change something.
It's a very good point, and I'll just say, in all honesty and seriousness, I have a degree, but I haven't worked in academia for 15 years, and the genesis of that article on transformative conservation came out of my work in state government in California, in Lake Tahoe, and I was lucky because I was in a senior management position, so I got to actually push a lot of these things and how we did our landscape resilience assessment and how we did our climate change assessment and adaptation planning. Certainly not perfect, but anyway, it's just one example of one of those intervention points, and obviously there are many others that have similar power. I just share that simply to say that these recommendations were not kind of conceptual armchair recommendations. They were like, wow, what have we done over the past 5 years, and what was, where did we fall short, and where do we see that we'd need to do better if we were really going to try and, like Peter was saying, get even further, get even bigger. So anyway, at least a anchor point. Let me, without further ado, we're a little bit behind, but I'm glad with a small group we get to actually all share a little bit more. So let me go to Manuela, and I will share my screen, and Manuela will walk us through our work, which I think will generate a little bit more of this discussion. And then we also have Peter and Bent, which I'll be very excited just to hear a little bit about their experiences in kind of at this interface and kind of margin walking. So let me, Manuela, I will share the screen, and you are welcome then to take us away. And you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so currently our group has 250 members. You can see the distribution we have right now. Our members, as other commission members, come from different professional backgrounds. Some work for nonprofits, a few from IUCN or the UN. Many are involved in academia, and also from development organizations. So I guess we get our perspectives from very different regions and practitioners or academics or different perspectives on how to work these themes. Can you put the next one, please? Okay, so we focus on, for these 4 years, these are the main themes that we're all working on because they are part of the commission mandate, also the IUCN member resolution and the IUCN program. So that is like our guideline. So, you know, there's a lot going on nature-based solutions, the standard that is also developed by IUCN, red list of ecosystems, which is a huge theme in the Commission of Ecosystem Management, of course, and how the other thematic groups such as cultural practices, governance, that we have Thomas, who is now leading the group, right? And here are the group related to working land and seascapes would be agroecosystems, but there's also other groups that, and also the specialist groups that have to do with these working lands and seascapes. We're focusing a lot on conceptual development and network development, and that also reflects on how we've restructured the way of working in the thematic group. Can you please go on to the next one? So related to the themes that I just mentioned, these are the projects and prospects that our group members are currently working on. So these are initiatives that have come through from different webinars, meetings, personal kind of interest on how to develop some of these themes. We don't have a lot of time to go into a lot of detail of these. I'll just mention them and then we'll see if there's any specific questions. So the use of decentralized technologies for conservation. There's Carolina Carvalho and was it Peter? Who else was it that developed recently a first webinar that gives us a huge new approach to how to link technologies to conservation, to systems thinking. There will be others coming through later. So this is also a theme that is where lots of young professionals feel that they can engage and develop. So it's new and it's very interesting, and we're just kind of beginning to work on this. The South American approaches to resilience is one that I'm leading with the South American regional chair. So we want to see how these concepts are being implemented, used, perceived, thought of, developed in the region. This will be most likely in October. A resilience framework, including governments. And I'll leave these other three for Dorian, and Mike is also leading one of these in the revisions of the NBS standard and revising the bibliography. So maybe they can give more information on these, as well as the rewilding, carbon offsets, and RLE, and how they link to the other groups in the commission. And indigenous approaches to resilience and transformation. The members began proposing to kind of just get a perspective bibliography to kind of organize what bibliography we have on that, because there's also many questions, especially from young scholars, on how to link themes. So I'll leave it there because I'm not so sure how much time we have left. The next one.
Oops. Yep. Thanks, Manuela.
Is also on how we are changing the leadership circle and consisting of project leaders. So we're changing from a more centralized or decentralized group to a distributed scheme of working. So this is where you see that there's the initiatives that we just mentioned, the ways where members can participate and link to either within the group or with other groups or even with other commissions, although we also have to see, you know, where other groups or commissions are already developing further on these themes. So we can talk more about that. Communication channels, we have the ones that Mike and Dorian previously opened before, the Google group and the Resilient Landscapes blog, that also if people don't want to engage in such bigger projects, let's say, they can also propose something to publish in the Resilient Landscapes blog. And we also have the traditional IUCN portal page with lots of resources and materials from what we've talked and everything. And also many of these webinars are also published in the YouTube channel of the Commission. So I'll leave it there. And
Thank you, Manuela. And I'll just add a thread in. It's a good reminder about the YouTube channel as well, which CEM has as a whole. Just briefly going back to number 3, the resilience framework, we have Brian Jenkins. He's based in Australia and was pulling together a series of cases, mostly with CERT members. There'll be some crossover to other groups. Like Manuela mentioned, when we have an overlap, for example, with cultural practices, then we coordinate with their leads and try and pull those pieces in and just make sure that we're supporting and aware of each other's work. So that's how we work across these groups by design. CERT, because like Mike mentioned it, because it's systems based, we tend to touch a lot of the other CEM groups, but are interested in supporting each other and sharing information to maintain that kind of coordination. Similar with Thomas and some of the governance work that he's leading within the governance group. So they're kind of parallel projects there. The rewilding piece, these are also good examples of that. Rewilding is a piece, actually Bent is on the phone and also Mike, and there are a few other members who are interested in writing about some of their experiences and some of their ongoing work with rewilding. There's also a lot of ongoing conversation around carbon offsets, some of the concerns, some of the potential linkages to carbon offsets, and then some work with another CEM group, the Red List of Ecosystems, and how, if you're thinking about transformation, some of these ecosystem assessments per the Red List actually can help you get some further insights in kind of anticipating where transformations might occur. And then this piece that was number 5, this is looking ahead. There is a global standard for nature-based solutions that several people helped develop within CEM, and then it was adopted more broadly by IUCN and some other international organizations. That, however, does come up for review. So Mike, Manuela mentioned, is on the call, was helping along with a couple other people that are interested to pull together a bibliography to really inform that revision of the standard, which will come up for the next, every 4 years, the World Conservation Congress. So just in the interest of time, since we're got a quarter left, I was going to go to Peter and Bent and invite you guys to say a few words, introduce yourself a little bit. Maybe if you want to say a little bit about your experience so far with CERT and with Young Professionals Network, and then how that might tie to your current work would be great. And then we'll save those last 10 minutes or so just for open discussion on any of this work piece or any of this experiential piece. Is that okay with you, Peter and Bent? I'm just double checking. Okay. Peter, do you want to start? I'll actually stop
Yeah,
sharing
sure.
the screen just so people can see you better. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you, Dorian. Can you all hear me all right? Great. Yeah, so for my part, my background is a sort of a polyculture of different fields adjacent to conservation. I've worked in dance and theater and gone on to do permaculture design and anthropology as an undergraduate degree. And for the last few years, I've been working in project management around public food forests. But right now I'm here in the UK chasing a master's degree and looking at arts as a fulcrum for landscape regeneration. So sort of sitting between all of these worlds, actually the CERT group is one of the really rare but unique nexes where we're able to fit these different pieces of a whole system together. And it's very cool to see this inside of the IUCN being predominantly a science-based organization, but that's able to also tap into these really unique and sort of intrinsic pieces of the whole puzzle, like culture and arts and systems transformation that really straddles all of this. So my experience in CERT has thus far been kind of arriving into it as a member who joined in New Zealand when I was living there. And after about maybe 6 months to a year of just observing it remotely and participating as I could through emails, I got to attend the Congress in Marseille last September, which was a really beautiful event to see everyone working together on these huge problems and challenges in person. And it was a delight to get to meet a bunch of other young professionals and put names to faces and have some great time out on the streets of Marseille, but also really diving in with all of the sort of the core people in our field and getting that depth of experience and kind of helping us as we were finding our feet in this space to sort of navigate to what are the really important issues that we can bring some fresh perspective to and that we can tackle in this really critical decade. So yeah, as Dorian and Manuela mentioned, right now I'm working on a couple of webinars around blockchain and decentralized technologies. that I'm leading with Carolina, and those have been really great fun thus far. But also I've periodically been publishing some insights on blockchain systems and land regeneration, also on arts and what that space is really showing up to the conservation field with in some really exciting ways. And soon I'll be able to send another one of those out around this really interesting moment that's happening in not only conservation, but also heritage and arts around the same idea of sort of a transformative conservation and a mentality of, rather than being about enumeration and preservation, more of an ethos of participation and long-term engagement. So yeah, it's been really interesting to be in this group and see people coming from so many different perspectives and working on different pieces of this whole system. But yeah, no, it's been a delight so far, and hopefully we'll get to see all these inquiries keep growing over the years ahead.
Thank you, Peter. That's terrific. And Peter, as you mentioned, is one of our project leaders who's also a young professional. Let me go ahead to Bent. Bent, go ahead and jump in here.
Yeah, I'm Bent, obviously also said on the slide. I'm doing a master's degree at the moment in international nature conservation in Göttingen and New Zealand, hopefully next semester. And did my bachelor's in environmental sciences. And I'm sort of on the ecology side. I think I'm mostly interested in systems dynamics and especially disturbance, like why do ecosystems evolve in the way they do? How do they change over time and space? And why is it that like it's always changing and there's this constant change and constant dynamic ongoing? But I'm also quite interested in the systems side of things, and especially sort of maybe ethics and paradigms underlying conservation and also science, because I think that's sometimes, especially natural science, lacking a bit sort of reflection of what you bring to the table, and also maybe a bit of awareness of other disciplines or other also non-scientific approaches to knowledge. I mean, I've also only joined in this spring, I think, and I think I joined a bit more for selfish reasons because I'm not very stable location-wise. Like I've been in Göttingen and now in Denmark and now New Zealand. And in my bachelor's, I've always done some stuff in my home university, like university politics and stuff, but that doesn't work if you're not there. So I found out about the commissions on in like a summer school, and yeah, I just applied, and I think it's been really, really great because I think it's very nice to not be like the third wheel, the one person that's always online, but actually be in something where everyone is online, and seeing that yeah, it's so many people all around the world that actually contribute to this. And also what you said, Peter, that it's from so many backgrounds, which I actually did not expect that it would be, yeah, engineering, architects, non-scientific but also scientific. I think that's really a really great mix, and I'm very happy and thankful that I was able to join. And I think it's also been great that it's, I think, so low hierarchy, so yeah, great dialogue, although it's online. And I'm actually at the moment working with Mike and Sally on a blog post on rewilding, sort of circling around a beaver reintroduction in Cornwall, and maybe expanding on that as well. I think we'll figure out next meeting someday soon. And yeah, I think in general, I would just really like the SERT, because in my bachelor's, I had some systems thinking seminars, and I mean, I chose a more natural sciencey master's for a reason, because I wanted to also get that perspective a bit more strongly. But I still I'm glad to sort of have that systems thinking around here and see it a bit more, because I think for me it's a very sort of powerful tool, and I think it keeps you, also said it in the breakout session, I think it keeps you humble in a way, because it shows you that everything is complex, and maybe the very typical linear interaction sort of proposed in many instances, or also proclaimed over some decades, are at least not working as maybe as proclaimed, and that complex things are happening all over the place. And I think it also keeps you maybe humble. I mean, it's also just a concept and just a lens, and I think it always keeps you humble, seeing that, you know, what you're trying is maybe approximation of truth and getting close to solutions and close to something real. But yeah, I think it constantly reminds you that your solutions and your knowledge is imperfect. So I think that's a big win for me. And I think it also keeps you curious, because there's always some like, I think if you think linearly at a certain point, you get the illusion that you actually grasp how things works. But if you think in a complex way, you always think, hold on, now there's probably something more. And it just keeps on going or giving, I would say. So I think it keeps you curious. And I think it can also keep you hopeful, because you can see in a systems perspective that actually things might be working on a local scale. And there's like actual local social systems that obviously are, you know, in danger of climate change or global change as well, but they can still be resilient to a certain extent. And I think in a more linear approach, you often only see the big picture. You only see like global emissions or global economy, and then you see everything falling apart. But if you are in a system perspective, you can maybe have a small village or a permaculture or something that actually works for a group of people. And I think that's can keep you hopeful. So I think all over the systems perspective and the CERT is really it's really interesting. I'm very thankful to be here, and I think it's probably hopefully going to unfold even more. Yeah.
I'm honored and I've really enjoyed listening to both of you. Just because we have Salima, who's the lead for YPN, I'm going to go to Salima first and just see if Salima wanted to share anything or any comments, and then I'll open up to the group. We have 5 minutes left or so. We have one last slide just there, just about connections after this. But let me go first to Salima. I don't know if Salima had anything jumped to mind. Just want to give you an opportunity to weigh in if you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah. I really appreciate the work that has been completed in the group, especially Dorian, your willingness to work with us and the Young Professional Network to start building a bit more engagement for the young professionals. It's just we have so much expertise in the Young Professional Network. There's a lot of people that can be coordinated to work together. We all have kind of the same goals, but just different ways to get about things. So yeah, I just look forward to having a bit more collaboration between different commissions, different groups, and it's just wonderful to be able to work together on these things.
Thank you, Salima. And I'll just say, I really take to heart our chair of the commission, Angela Andrade, and Liette Vasseur, the co-lead, and many others, Mike included, have pushed young professional involvement for several years. And I think we're kind of finally reaching a threshold, particularly with the Congress at Marseille. There was critical mass. Deepu Sivaras is not able to join us on this call, but helped really bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and is a colleague of Salima. And so he was the former lead. So we're also in debt to him. And I would just say, I'm so interested in that. Okay, I'm 46, so I'm not particularly old, but I already see how I'm behind the curve of people like Peter and Bent, who are pushing some of these envelopes. So I'm really looking to anyone that's part of CERT who's a young professional, not just to participate, but to start leading. I mean, you all have the capacity already. It's not really an age thing. It's just whether you want to or not. So anyway, that's how I kind of view this larger, set of loops. With that amount of, oh, that's so cute. Thank you. I can be an honorary YPN. I still feel young at heart. Let me see if there are any quick burning comments from anyone, from Mike, Tomasz, or Manuela, just since we haven't heard from you in the past few minutes. And then we'll just give the last slide so people have a bit of contact information, and we'll adjourn. So maybe I'll just go in that order and ask, since it's easy. Mike, did you want to have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just a quick one. It was brilliant listening to you young guys, and it encourages me to keep going. I'm 71 now, and I really should be hanging up my computer, but listening to you guys, it's great. One of the things that there were some really good questions came out of these groups, and I'm just wondering if I shouldn't respond to some of those based on something like 20 years experience now working with complex systems and trying to get the whole paradigm shift from one from a few individuals to society at whole.
How about we do this,
as a
Mike?
whole? So
how about we do this? Let's end at the top of the hour. I'm certainly happy to stay on. Anyone else is welcome to stay on. We can take a few more minutes and continue recording, so then people have the ability to opt in, opt out. Let me just make sure, in case someone's stuck on time, that they have got an opportunity to say that. But I'll stay on and we can record it. Anyone else is welcome to stay on if that works for you.
yeah, it works for me.
Okay. Tomasz, sorry. I have a colleague,
Oh,
Tomasz.
you pronounce it very correctly. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Not
I have
so
a
many
colleague.
people do that. No, it was also very nice and quite privileged to be part of not only today's session, but also over the past 5 years within IUCN itself, and so much good information and stuff is coming out of IUCN, and especially the people, of course, because IUCN is its people. And I would be just happy if the governments, and it's with the paradigm shift, as Mike mentioned, that the leaders and governments would pay a little more attention what we do. Because sometimes I feel that we are perceived like eco-terrorists, that, oh, nature conservation, no, economy first, we have to build more factories and stuff and produce more stuff. But it's not like that. No, we are not. And I try to enlighten people around me, however, not so successfully. But nonetheless, I'm just very happy to see that so many talented, smart individuals are part of IUCN and producing such high quality content that has potential to contribute to change the world for a little bit better.
Thank you so much, Tomasz, and thank you also for joining us as the lead for the governance group, ecosystem governance group within CEM. So thank you for also building that linkage on a regular basis. Manuela, I'll turn to you for the last comment, then we'll show the last slides, and then we'll stick on for some of Mike's additional comments. But go ahead, Manuela.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have anything particular to add. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I really liked how Ben mentioned that complexity makes you more, what was the word he used?
The humble, humility?
Humble, to understand the world and yourself and not think that you know everything, because that's more of a linear kind of thinking, but that you're always available and open to know there's more. In complexity, there's always more to keep in mind and to include in the scenario that you're thinking of. And on that, I would say that the Colombian government that just began this week is kind of an experiment on complexity and how to involve social movements and youth and women and indigenous people and vulnerable populations in a government, and how that will be so difficult in a world where the economic system still depends on oil and mining and carbon, and there's a lot of discussion that at least will happen around carbon offsets. I mean, a lot of these issues that we talk about on how on that scale of a national government can actually happen or not in 4 years. So it's a good experiment site, at least from an outsider's perspective. Yeah, I'm gonna have to leave after your last slide.
Okay.
So
well, thank you. You guys can see why I'm thrilled to actually have Manuela as a co-lead, and definitely that's a plug for the Spanish-speaking webinar that's coming up in October. So don't miss that. Let me then just share the last slides, which is very quick. Share screen. Okay, here we go. Thank you for bearing with me. So it's just to say, if you're welcome to join. If you're a CEM member, you can join CERT via the portal. Also, if you join CEM, if I understand correctly from Salima, you're automatically enrolled in YPN. Good, she's nodding, I got it right. And also, I'll just say this briefly, Salima, there's a forthcoming Young Professionals Orientation session. Do you want to say anything more about that, Salima? Anything else on that one?
Nothing more to add, just that we're organizing the Young Professional Networks so that those orientation sessions and additional sessions are a bit more regionally accessible. Yeah, so to be discussed.
Perfect. So thank you for augmenting that. And then just as the last piece here, oops, so hopefully you can see the slides. There are some reference materials. Mike mentioned a couple other materials that are relevant as well. And there's the email contacts if you have questions about joining. So with that, I will formally adjourn, but I'm happy, like I said, I will stick on and we'll turn it back over to Mike. And Mike, if you want to take a few minutes and share what your thoughts were on some of those outstanding questions. If you need to drop off, don't be shy. We understand. We'll continue recording. If you want to stay on, you're certainly welcome. I think we'll take 3-4 minutes and hear from Mike, and then we'll adjourn. Thanks, Manuela. Go ahead, Mike, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the one question about how do you turn the concepts into practice? The only way to do it is to start working with the tools. And I know this from personal experience. I picked up the concepts a long time ago because they made a lot of sense to me in terms of what I was trying to do with ecosystems and community-based natural resource management. And it's been a slow process because we're actually trained to think in certain kinds of ways. Most of us, natural scientists anyway, very much indoctrinated, if you like, in reductionist science and linear thinking. planning processes were all very linear and based on reductionist thinking. Learning how to think in terms of systems really does involve rewiring your brain. And that doesn't happen quickly. And the older you are, the slower the process is. So you've just got to jump in and start working with the tools. And that WWF publication that I mentioned has got some of the basics in there. And just work with those and go for it. And you learn as you go. And you will over time become a competent systems thinker, as well as retaining whatever you learned as in your earlier career as in terms of reductionist thinking. That the two are complementary. You can't just replace the one with the other. Reductionist science provides us with a great deal of knowledge. We need the systems approach to synthesize it all and bring in all those different perspectives to give us that holistic picture of what is actually going on, rather than the reductionist approach, which says, oh, we have the solution. All you've got to do is this, and the problem will be solved. It just, world doesn't work that way. Getting people to embrace complexity, very slow, because people are, by the time they've reached 25 years of age, they've pretty much made up their minds who they are as individuals. They've been very rigorously shaped by their interactions with their peers, their parents, their grandparents, education systems, and so on. And they've developed a whole way of thinking, which is habitual, all right? It's unconscious. And that's necessary, because in order to navigate a very complex world, we don't have the time to stop and think about every step of the way. What are we going to do next? We do it automatically. And those automatic responses, they're pretty much developed by the time we're 25 years of age. So it's a paradigm shift in individuals, which can happen relatively quickly if you say, yes, this is something that's really important to me. But to get that same shift to occur in society is a very different kind of process. Educators that I've spoken to and systems thinkers that I've spoken to said the best way to do it is to, in fact, start working with junior school children. From the American system, I think it's the K to something, K-12s. And there is a creative learning exchange which does exactly that. It provides training materials for school children. And so if we get them young, then they'll get it, and they'll come into the real into adulthood and maturity, fully understanding how complex systems work. For folks like you, you're probably fairly steeply engaged with whatever it is that you learned in your early developmental years. So making the shift is going to be a little bit harder. And that's about the mindsets as well as embracing complexity. And then there was a really important point about how local initiatives are really important. And also it touched on the matter of complexity and context. And one of the things that we need to recognize with systems is that context is everything. And that what works well in one local system, because of the ecological characteristics and the social characteristics of the system, may not work anywhere else at all. So, but on the other hand, there are certain things that might happen at a local level, and people from neighboring locations will look over their fence and say, oh, look what they're doing. That's interesting. Maybe we can take some of those ideas, we'll modify them a bit to suit our particular circumstances. And that's what they do. So it's not about cookie cutters, it's about learning from what other people are doing and where other people are having successes and failures too, because it teaches you what you want to avoid. And that's really how scaling up works in complex systems. Starts with local innovation, which is either copied or not, until you've got a very large mass of communities within a landscape, for instance, that are saying, okay, this is how we're going to do things at a landscape level. But whatever governance system you have in there needs to take into account that there are still going to be local variations, and that people within those locations need to have the freedom to adapt and be flexible as they need to be to maintain their system in a healthy condition. without being rather rigorously driven from the top, which says this is how everybody in this landscape is going to do things, because that's getting back to the sort of the linear thinking, top-down command and control. So I think that's good for a start. I see Thomas has got his hand up.
Go ahead, Thomas. Did you have a comment or a last question? And then we'll take this and then we'll adjourn. Go ahead, Thomas. I'll give Mike a chance to respond, but go ahead.
It's both comment and question, kind of.
Okay, we're close on time. We're about 10 minutes over. So if you can keep it succinct, that'd be greatly appreciated. Okay. Go ahead, Thomas.
As Mike mentioned, like one size fits all solution doesn't really exist. And that's why I'm very much interested in the processes that actually govern these changes, these transformations. And getting them young, as Mike mentioned, might be the best option. It's like march through the institutions. But I have a question to all of you, actually. Like, what would you say might be the crucial tipping point for either community or the leaders to actually change their attitude towards the system thinking, to put aside the sectoral things? What I could see, for example, what I've seen in China extensively, that people like since over past 10 years.
We're about 10 past, so help me wrap it up, Thomas.
People got richer and they started to care about the environment and way more. And it really shows in China that the environment is getting better. So what would you, all of you, would think that the tipping point for the leaders or community might be?
Thank you, Tomasz. I appreciate you helping with time. I'm just trying to respect that some people might have to drop off, but I appreciate that, and I'll leave that to people to contemplate. Mike, you have the last word, and then we're adjourning.
Tough question, Thomas. I could send you something in the email, but not for now. But I mean, also really relevant. Yeah, thanks.
No, it is famous last words. I mean, Mike is very genuine. Like you'll get one or two key articles, exactly what you asked. So great question, Tomasz. We will adjourn. Thank you guys so much for the extra time and joining us. And thank you again, Salima, for being willing to do this joint piece. Really excited for the opportunity just to reach your network. So thank you again.
Cheers now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.